"I can't marry you," I said, before he'd even climbed down from his horse. "I know that's not what the letter promised, but I can't." He sat there a long moment, reins loose in his gloved hands, dust settling around the horse's hooves, and he didn't look angry. He looked like a man who'd heard bad news before and knew how to carry it without dropping anything. "My name is Delia Marsh." And I was 23 years old, standing on the porch of a house that wasn't mine, waiting for a man I'd never met to arrive and take me as his wife. And instead, I told him no before he'd said a single word of greeting. I should explain how I got there. 3 years before, my father had died owing money to half of Concho County, and my mother had followed him into the ground not 6 months later, worn down by grief and bad lungs. I was left with a house I couldn't keep and a name that meant nothing without money behind it. There is a particular kind of shame in being poor and proud at the same time. You learn to hold your chin up while your stomach is empty. You learn to say, "I'm managing fine," to church ladies, to already know you aren't. So when Mrs. Everly at the boarding house told me about the matrimonial paper, the one where ranchers and businessmen out west wrote in looking for wives, I didn't laugh at it the way some girls did. I wrote a letter. I described myself honestly, plain-spoken, hard-working, not given to weeping, and I waited. The man who answered was named Thomas Reyes, and he owned land I couldn't picture, even after he described it 3 separate times in 3 separate letters. 11,000 acres outside a town called Cedar Hollow. Cattle beyond counting. A house with real glass windows. He wrote plainly too. He said he was 38, widowed once, no children, and tired of eating meals alone at a table built for a family. I liked that honesty. I wrote back. Over the course of 8 months, we built something on paper, not love, but the beginning shape of a life 2 people might share. And then, 3 weeks before he was due to arrive, I met Caleb. He was passing through on his way to Abilene, hauling a wagon of tools for his brother's smithing business. And his horse threw a shoe right outside the boarding house. I helped him walk it to the farrier because I knew the man wouldn't cheat him if I was standing there. Caleb had a crooked smile and hands scarred from working iron. And he talked to me like I was already someone he knew well, not someone he was meeting. He stayed for days instead of 1. On the last night, he stood at the gate of Mrs. Everly's yard, hat in his hands, and said, "I got no land. Delia, I got no house with glass windows. I got a brother's forge and a wagon and about $40 to my name." He looked at the ground, then back at me. "But I'd come back for you. If you'd have me wait on." I told him I'd already given my word to another man. He nodded like he'd expected that answer, and he left the next morning. And I stood at that gate for a long time after his wagon disappeared down the road, feeling something crack open in my chest that I didn't have a name for. So when Thomas Reyes rode up to that same gate 3 weeks later, tall in the saddle, hat low against the sun, I already knew I was going to hurt him before he even said good afternoon. "You wrote some fine letters, Miss Marsh," he said, finally swinging down off the horse. "I came a long way on the strength of them." "I know it," I said. My voice was shaking, but I kept my chin level the way my mother taught me. And I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, but I won't lie to you either. There's someone else. He hasn't asked me proper, and he's got nothing to offer. And by every practical measure, I should be walking down to that church with you tomorrow morning like we planned. But my mind's been elsewhere since he left, and it wouldn't be fair to you. Marrying a woman who's already given her thinking to somebody else. I expected him to be furious. I expected him to remind me of the money he'd spent on the journey, the arrangements already made with the Reverend, the humiliation of riding 200 miles for a bride who turned him away on the porch steps. Instead, he took his hat off, wiped his brow with his forearm, and looked out at the road like he was considering the weather. "Well," he said, "that's a hard thing to hear, but I'd rather hear it now than after the vows." He paused. This fella. He coming back for you. He said he would. I don't know when, and if he doesn't. I didn't have an answer for that. The truth was ugly and plain. I had turned away a good man. A wealthy man. A man who by every account would have treated me kindly. On the strength of 4 days and a promise from someone with $40 and no land to his name. It was the kind of foolishness that could ruin a woman in a town like ours, where reputation was the only currency poor folks had left. Thomas didn't leave that day. He asked, plain as anything, if he could stay in town a week, at his own expense at the boarding house. Just to be sure this isn't grief talking or fear of the unknown talking, dressed up as love. He said it without cruelty. He said it like a man who'd learned patience the hard way. I agreed. Mostly because I didn't know how to refuse a request that reasonable. That week taught me things about Thomas Reyes I hadn't learned from letters. He wasn't cold, the way I'd have expected a wealthy rancher to be. He fixed Mrs. Everly's sagging porch step without being asked, working through the afternoon in his shirt sleeves like a man twice removed from the 11,000 acres waiting for him. He sat with old Mr. Hutchins on the boarding house porch and listened to him talk about the war for 2 hours without once looking bored. He asked me questions about my parents, my childhood, the things I missed and the things I didn't. And he listened to the answers instead of waiting for his turn to speak. On the 4th night, we sat on the porch steps together, the same steps he'd fixed, and he said, I lost my first wife to fever 3 years back. We were married 6 years and never had a child that lived past its first winter. I stopped writing letters to matrimonial papers for a long while after she passed. Started again because the house got too quiet, and quiet like that does something to a man. He looked at me sideways. I'm not telling you this so you'll pity me into marrying me. I'm telling you because I think you understand something about being left with an empty house and not knowing how to fill it proper. I do understand that, I said. And I meant it. Then you understand why I'd rather you marry me, because you want a life with me. Not because you're afraid of what people will say if you don't. I hadn't cried in front of him yet. Not once. Not even when I told him no on the first day. But I cried then, quietly, and he didn't reach for me or try to comfort me with words. He just sat there, letting me have the moment without making it about himself. And somehow that was kinder than anything he could have said. Word got around town. The way word does in small places. Mrs. Pruitt at the dry goods store told anyone who'd listened that the Marsh girl had turned away. A rich rancher for some traveling smith's apprentice with holes in his boots. Some of it was cruel. Some of it, I'll admit, was true. I felt the weight of it every time I walked to church, every time I bought flour, every time someone's eyes lingered on me a moment too long before they looked away. Caleb wrote once, about 5 weeks after he left. The letter was short. He said the work in Abilene had turned into steadier work than he expected, that his brother was thinking of setting up a second forge, that he thought of me more than was probably good for a man trying to keep his mind on hot iron. He didn't ask me to wait. He didn't promise a date he'd return. He just said, I meant what I said at that gate, Delia. I just don't know yet when I can back it up with anything worth having. I read that letter maybe 20 times. And each time I felt the same ache, but I also felt something else creeping in alongside it. A tiredness of waiting on a man's uncertain promise while a certain, decent life sat within reach. Thomas stayed in Cedar Hollow. No, I've gotten ahead of myself. He stayed in our town, boarding at Mrs. Everly's for nearly a month. He didn't press me. He didn't remind me of the money or the arrangements. He worked around town, earned a reputation as a fair and steady man, and let me come to my own conclusions in my own time. It was, I understood later, its own kind of courtship, not the fevered kind that had swept me up with Caleb, But something built slow, board by board, like the porch step he'd mended. The turning point came on a Sunday. After church, when Thomas found me sitting alone by the well behind the churchyard, away from the crowd that had gathered to gossip and admire each other's hats. "I've got to head back to Cedar Hollow soon," he said. "The land doesn't run itself, and my foreman's a good man, but he's not me. I can't keep waiting in a town that isn't mine, hoping a woman changes her mind." He crouched down near where I sat, so we were closer to eye level. "I'm not going to ask you to choose me out of guilt or duty or fear of Mrs. Pruitt's tongue. But I'm going to ask you plain one more time, and then I'll accept whatever you say and won't ask again. Delia, will you marry me? Not the version of me you wrote to 8 months back. Me now. Having sat on that porch step and listened to you cry and watched. You carry the weight this whole town's put on you without ever once complaining to my face. That woman. Will she marry this man?" I sat with that question longer than was probably fair to him. I thought about Caleb's crooked smile and the way something in my chest had cracked open at that gate. I thought about the letter with no promised date. And I thought about Thomas fixing a porch step that wasn't his to fix. Sitting with a lonely old soldier for 2 hours. Telling me about his dead wife not to win sympathy, but because he trusted me enough to be honest. "I don't love you yet," I said. "Not the way songs talk about it. I want to be honest with you, the way you've been honest with me." "I know it," he said. "I'm not asking for that yet. I'm asking if you'll let me try to earn it, day by day, out at Cedar Hollow, instead of me riding home alone." "Yes," I said. "I'll marry you." We were wed the following Saturday, in the same small church where half the town had watched me humiliate a rich man on his own wedding week, and now watched me marry him anyway. A month later, for reasons that had nothing to do with his land and everything to do with the man he'd shown himself to be while waiting for my answer, Cedar Hollow was everything he'd described and somehow smaller for all. Its size, 11,000 acres, can feel like a great deal of empty when you're a stranger walking through a strange house. The first months were hard in ways I hadn't expected. I missed the sound of the boarding house, the creak of familiar floors, Mrs. Everly's terrible coffee. Thomas gave me room to miss those things without making me feel disloyal for it. He taught me the names of the hands who worked the land, the particular way the light came through the glass windows in late afternoon. Gold and heavy, nothing like the thin light back home. I won't say I forgot Caleb entirely. There were nights I thought of that gate, that crooked smile, and wondered about the life I might have had waiting for a man with $40 and a wagon full of tools. But those thoughts grew quieter with time, replaced by smaller, steadier things, the sound of Thomas's boots on the porch each evening, the particular gentleness with which he'd take my hand crossing rough ground, the way he'd learned, without my ever telling him directly, exactly how I took my coffee, and exactly which of his silences meant he was thinking hard on something, and which meant he was simply content. It was near a year later, in early spring, that a letter arrived addressed to me at the Cedar Hollow post box, and I recognized Caleb's cramped handwriting before I even opened it. My hands went cold holding it. Thomas was out mending fence that day, and I sat alone at the kitchen table with the letter unopened for the better part of an hour before I finally broke the seal. He wrote that he'd married. That spring past, a girl from Abilene whose father owned the dry goods store there, and that his brother's second forge had done well enough that he'd bought a small house with actual glass in the windows, which he mentioned, I think, because he remembered me once admiring the idea of it in one of Thomas's letters I'd shown him during those 4 days he'd stayed. He wrote that he hoped I'd found happiness, that he thought of those 4 days sometimes with a kind of fondness that didn't ache anymore, only warmed, the way a burn scar stops hurting and just becomes part of the skin. I read it twice. And then I folded it and put it in the bottom of my sewing box. And when Thomas came in that evening, dust on his shirt and tired lines around his eyes, I told him about the letter without him having to ask. I've learned since that marriages built on honesty from the start tend to stay honest. The way a house built plumb tends to stay standing straight through hard weather. How do you feel about it? He asked, sitting across from me at the table. Glad for him, I said, and found I meant it entirely, without the smallest thread of the old ache pulling at the words. And gladder for myself, if I'm honest, that I'm sitting here and not there. He reached across the table and took my hand, the same gentle way he took it crossing rough ground. And he didn't say anything self-satisfied or triumphant, though he'd have earned the right to. He just held my hand a while, the lantern light catching the gray starting at his temples. The window behind him gone dark gold with evening, and outside I could hear the cattle settling for the night and the particular quiet of a house that had, somewhere in that year, stopped being strange to me and started being simply home. I love you, I told him. Plain as anything, the way he'd have wanted it, said, without embellishment. Not the way I thought love was supposed to feel back at that gate a year ago. Slower than that. But it's grown in deep, Thomas, and it isn't going anywhere. I know it, he said, echoing the words he'd said to me so many times that first month, when I'd confessed things I was ashamed of and he'd simply accepted them without flinching. I've known it a while now. I was only waiting for you to catch up. That spring, I planted a garden along the side of the house facing east, so the morning light would hit it first, and every year since. I've stood in that garden some quiet mornings and thought about the girl who once stood at a gate believing love had to announce itself all at once, in a rush, or not count as love at all. I know better now. I know it can arrive slow and steady as a man mending a porch step that isn't his, asking nothing in return but the chance to keep showing up the next day. And the day after that, until one morning you wake up and realize the waiting is over. And it was over long before you noticed it end.